I want to talk today about supposed toxic masculinity. And I think this is going to be a good discussion, not only about masculinity itself, but also about whether it's broken and the effect that MAGA Trumpism has had, as well as Trump himself and the manosphere influencers, Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, the effect that they've all had on this issue. And it'll also let us talk a little more broadly about the cultural questions around masculinity, whether there is a crisis of masculinity, whether it has anything to do with trans people or the LGBT community, as some on the right like to claim. And to even frame this issue, we first have to talk about what we can agree on as the facts go. Now, one fact is that manosphere influencers like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, Tucker Carlson, Patrick Bet-David, the Liver King, and others, you might say, well, I don't know if this one or that one is necessarily part of the manosphere. To a degree, Trump is part of this. They've gained huge followings. And to many of their followers, to the young men that follow them, they really have become mentors, in a sense, about what it means to be masculine, what it means to be a man, alpha versus beta. And the theme here is that these manosphere influencers and figures are usually a particular type of man, but not always. So they tend to look physically strong, sometimes because of steroids, but they have a particular look. They purport to have sex appeal or implicitly present themselves as what a traditional heterosexual woman would want. They're not usually super enlightened when it comes to egalitarian views and ideas. Now, you might notice something. You might hear me saying this and you might be saying, David, have you looked at Trump? Have you looked at Jordan Peterson? They are not these muscular stereotypes of the alpha male. And you would be completely correct. One of the interesting things about Trump and Peterson and some others is they've managed to take on the persona despite not really being that. Trump is obese. He's out of shape. He's not attractive in any normal sense of the word. He doesn't exercise. He's not strong, but he's managed to build the persona. And Trump has been able to do this by playing up negative traits also associated with masculinity in some circles, like never admitting to mistakes. He doesn't read sissy books. He doesn't eat vegetables, that sort of nonsense. So the next thing to explore is, why have people, especially young men, right-leaning but not always, been drawn into this? And there are some realities about what's happening along gender lines in the world that we really shouldn't ignore. It is true that in some areas, young men are falling behind young women, and the power dynamics for romantic relationships are being skewed towards women to a degree. Now, it's critical for me to mention here, CEOs, presidents at the top positions of power are still very skewed towards men. But in sort of a general level, women are doing better in school. Girls are doing better in school. Women are more likely to go to college. Women are more likely, and they're actually starting to surpass men in terms of entering into what we call elite knowledge work, some of the more desirable jobs. They're doing better in test scores. And this then has the further effect of making men less appealing in the heterosexual dating pool. One big trait that predicts a man's success in long-term romantic heterosexual relationships is, does he appear to have prospects in life? And the better women and girls do, the more the bar is sort of raised as far as men are concerned. And we see more and more men having zero relationships with women, being unable to find women willing to date them, etc. So in a sense, we should acknowledge, especially we on the left, there is a reason that men would say, I need something. I'm looking for something to help me. And so what you end up with is this fertile ground for the rise of toxic masculinity, or if people don't like that phrase, we might call it distorted masculinity. Maybe that makes more sense. What Trump and Peterson and Liver King and this steroid sales guy on Twitter named Andy Elliott and Andrew Tate, what they tap into is they portray the strength and dominance that a lot of men think they aspire to. And they offer a narrative that if you're failing, it's because the system is woke or the system is rigged against you. And the solution, according to many of them, is even more cartoonish masculinity. let's talk about the way this works. You tune into these influencers, and there's a huge overlap with the MAGA right wing. And then they capitalize on your insecurities. The girls are doing better in school. They're getting into better colleges. They're not paying attention to me. They're getting better jobs right out of college. They're the ones who decide which of these 10 gentlemen suitors am I interested in dating. And what these manosphere guys offer is the promise that you can reclaim your status through dominance and aggression. The parallel to Trumpism is so clear. Trumpism sells a vision or a version of masculinity, really both, that is also rooted in these primal instincts and returning to a bygone era when America was great. And that includes male dominance, male success over female success in the workplace and education, women relegated back to working in the home and raising kids. So the debate around wokeness and toxic masculinity, that may not be the right language, but it's language that turns many people off. And we've talked about that. But what we have is this Instagramification of masculinity, symbols of strength and power, guns, muscles, aggression, sometimes steroids, sometimes supplements, sometimes eating cow heart or at least a carnivore diet. It's all intertwined with the same ideology. And what we end up with is a right-wing echo chamber that glorifies the alpha male that people like Trump claim to be, despite the fact that Trump actually isn't it. And the distortion is significant. If you look, by the way, at true alpha behavior, even in primates, it includes compassion. It includes being a leader of your community or your immediate clan of animals, if we're talking about the animal kingdom. But the Trumpist version of alpha masculinity is rooted in aggression and in dominance, which actually fractures society and communities rather than strengthen them. And it also doesn't really do anything to help the young men who are struggling to achieve what they claim to want. Now, the other aspect that's really important for us on the left to acknowledge is that part of Trump's dominance as a political leader, part of the reason for the success of people like Trump and Andrew Tate at creating this perverted archetype of masculinity, is that there is not a meaningful, healthy masculine archetype for the left. Now, I'm going to give you examples to look at, but what we end up with is a space, a vacuum in which Trump and Tate and the Liver King archetypes offer something that is appealing to people, even if it's a regressive and harmful version of manhood. MAGA masculinity values, appearing strong and tough over genuinely contributing to your community, being a good father or partner, being a teacher or mentor, it starts to look good because all of those things I just mentioned are dismissed because they're either effeminate or they're worthless or they're not going to appeal to women in the version of masculinity espoused by MAGA and by the manosphere. We also have to recognize that the right is really good at setting up rabbit holes everywhere in ways that the left doesn't have. You might be interested in learning about personal finance. You wind up listening to Dave Ramsey, and next thing you know, you're in the right-wing manosphere echo chamber. You might be looking for content about business and entrepreneurship, and you wind up listening to Patrick Bet-David and his disproportionately right-wing guests, or you end up with who the hell knows which steroid influencer on TikTok. You might be interested in Zoomer pop culture, and you end up listening to like Brett Cooper. And then the entire sport of MMA is essentially a big right-wing rabbit hole at this point. The left doesn't really have that. The healthier and more progressive model of masculinity should be presented. There should be an effort made by the left, even if we don't have these ways of pulling people in like the right does right now. Things like EQ, emotional intelligence, would be valued. Empathy, community building. You don't abandon strength and ambition. You don't say strength and ambition are bad, but you integrate them with values that are not antisocial and actually promote collective progress and respect. The leftist masculinity model still has strength as a feature, but it's using your strength to protect vulnerable people rather than just dominate others, to contribute to society, to teach, to be an activist, rather than the MAGA win at all costs with unhinged aggression. Instead of a view that here is the one model of masculinity that's approved. It's, hey, you know what? There are many models. There's LGBT, there's trans, there's all of this stuff. And being an ally of those groups doesn't make you any less of a man or any less strong. If anything, it makes you stronger because you understand your identity isn't jeopardized by supporting others. Now, before getting to some positive examples of masculinity from the left, it's also relevant to mention that even many of their alpha male gurus don't even meet their own image of masculinity. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump is obese. He's out of shape. He dyes his hair. He wears a massive amount of makeup. He's not athletic. He fake tans his skin. He was scared to join the military, so he got a letter about his bone spurs. He constantly plays the victim. He says he's treated so unfairly. He lost an election because he was not respected and treated unfairly by Biden or whatever. That doesn't even fit their own model. Jordan Peterson seems extremely fragile emotionally. There's nothing wrong with crying, but regularly weeping and wailing in his interviews is very much not the picture of masculinity that the right loves to play up. He's also very far from the rugged look that the alpha MAGAs claim is best. And if you look even at someone like Andrew Tate, the stories and the narratives about the sexual conquests are so over the top and obnoxious and obvious braggadocio that they seem more of a reflection of his insecurity rather than his dominance. So now let's talk about some other models of masculinity. Tim Walz is an interesting example, and I bring him up not because he's the epitome of this, but because he's in the news right now. Tim Walz doesn't fit into the right-wing stereotype about the left's men because Tim Walz knows guns, he knows farming, he knows auto maintenance, he knows football. But he also knows that sometimes you might defer to a woman in leadership the way he does running alongside Kamala Harris. You respect and you support women and you cooperate when it's possible. And he's guided by these principles of equality and justice while being closer to the vision of masculinity that the right champions. Scott Galloway, we've talked about before, the investor, now podcast host, author. We've talked before about Galloway in terms of his enlightened views on social issues, while at the same time being the super wealthy masculine figure who doesn't need to put others down. And he has most of what MAGA alphas say you want in a man, except on social issues, he's very progressive and he makes it clear his masculinity is not at all threatened by supporting trans people or gay people or whoever the case may be. Barack Obama is another interesting example. You know, as a constitutional law professor and, you know, he got mustard on whatever, a hot dog. They try to play it up like Obama's kind of a sissy man. But the truth is that President Obama is very calm and totally in control of any situation in which he finds himself, values and understands collaboration, has a high EQ, doesn't shame people or make fun of them the way Trump does. He's thoughtful. He wields significant power, but not through aggression and dominance. Instead, it's by connecting with people. He sees Michelle Obama as a 50-50 equal in his marriage. He's spoken about the importance of being a dad to his daughters. He doesn't suggest that he values his children primarily for what job they get or how much money they make, the way Donald Trump has shown. So there are absolutely interesting models on the left and from the left of a less toxic masculinity. So is there a crisis of masculinity? I don't even know what that means. But what the right asserts when they say that is too many sissy men. I think it's clear, especially if you look at the world of the MAGA manosphere type influencers, if there is a crisis, the crisis is caused by or a result of a perversion of what it means to be a man that comes from the right and comes from MAGA and to some degree comes from Trump.